You are listening to Blue Zone Brief. I'm Jens Stanovnik. Today, I'm talking with Gavin Clark, Managing Director of Delta-8 Pharmaceuticals. Gavin has spent over a decade guiding companies through Health Canada's cannabis licensing process. He teaches cannabis studies at the Pharmaceutical Technology College level, and he's been a medical cannabis patient himself for more than 25 years. Which means he was navigating this long before there was a legal framework to navigate. Gavin, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
You're welcome. Gavin, you've been a medical cannabis patient for more than 25 years. That goes back well before any of this was legal. What did access actually look like in those early years?
They were known as Section 55 exemptions to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act that were issued to people who demonstrated before a court, severe disability or health condition that cannabis benefited it. Exception to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act was issued to that person, and they were therefore allowed to access cannabis through whatever means. Basically, the law sort of turned a blind eye to whether they grew it for themselves, acquired it through, the guy down the block or what have you. But that's what it looked like in the late 90s, basically.
Well, if you talk today to patients, what did you have at that time that would be hard to imagine today for someone who starts with CBD?
What did we have available at that time as a patient?
Yeah, it was just what did you have to do that patients today would find hard to imagine?
The only thing available was raw flower. So you certainly didn't have the plethora of products available on the market now, like things that are presented in a ratio format that are specifically high CBD products that have a much higher CBD content than THC content, or even ones that have a low THC content. There's a lot of emphasis, especially in the recreational market, on high THC. And what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not necessarily just the THC that's at work achieving their euphoric effect, if you will. There's, all these synergistic effects with the terpenes going on that are changing things and speeding. For example, limonene, the terpene limonene speeds the THC across the blood-brain barrier. Limonene is more common in sativa plants. A lot of people stay away from sativa plants because they say, "Oh, they make me, way too high," and it's simply because the THC is hitting their brain, their neurons, their receptors that much faster by crossing the blood-brain barrier more quickly. So you can modify the effect of the cannabinoids with the secondary ingredients, essentially. And CBD included amongst those. So if you modify, if you have 25% THC product with 2% CBD versus a product that has over 30% THC, it's probably the 25% product that's going to really give you what you're after than this product that's over 30% THC and yet has no CBD in it whatsoever. People don't understand that you essentially need to have a cannabinoid diet where you offset cannabinoids. CBD literally has the inverse effect on your endocannabinoid system that THC does. THC at your CB1 receptor has an agonist effect. CBD at the CB1 receptor has an inverse agonist effect. So it literally makes you unhigh, if that's possible. But the effect comes out as what people would commonly know is couch lock. So if you look at strains that are heavy indicas, they're usually high in THC, but they also have a good dose of CBD in it. Whereas a sativa is always high in THC and usually has almost no CBD in it whatsoever.
Yes. Now, you studied political science, not chemistry or
That's right.
pharmacology. How did you end up as the person companies call about cannabis regulation?
Through um, my own medical ailments, discovered the power of cannabis, the healing power of cannabis, and sought out as much information as I could on the subject matter. And, initially studied political science because I wanted to understand um, the legal basis on which um, it merited being illegal. Because I believed it didn't, it shouldn't be illegal. And I very much believed there was a fight to be had. And I was surprised, to be quite frankly, how quickly the industry came about. In the late 90s, you had section um, um, 55 exemptions to the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. But then 10 years later, you almost have the beginnings of the cannabis industry. And I say almost because you have some groups that start to coalesce that end up being what are now LPs or have been absorbed into other major LPs. Um, so it's been a very interesting journey because I've been on both sides of the fence. I've been on the illicit side, if you will. I worked for the largest dispensary in Toronto, which qualified all of its members as medical patients in need. So you had to get paperwork filled out by your doctor. They would contact your doctor, verify that you were a patient of that doctor's and that you did indeed have that condition. And on
Mhm.
that basis, they would allow you access to cannabis. And they were repeatedly raided by Toronto police. They had 7,000 members and were repeatedly raided by Metro Toronto police. And I know the owner of that institution is a personal good friend of mine. He was defended by Professor Alan Young, uh, uh, the University of Toronto Law School, and he was never convicted because ultimately it was found that it is a crime in and of itself to prevent people access to medical cannabis.
Sure.
It's an infraction of your Section 7 rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. If you're a security person.
Now, can you walk me through what Delta 8 actually does day to day? Someone comes to you wanting a license. What happens next? What do you do?
Um, and try and get at the heart of what it is they want to do in the cannabis business, what type of license it is that would be applicable um, to what they want to do. Do they even need a license for what they want to do? Um, and then from there, it would be a matter of, depending on the class of license, finding the site. And then finding if the site fits within the parameters that Health Canada requires, and that starts with the municipality. Unfortunately, in my opinion, municipalities have been given too much of a say in um, where some of these facilities can go. It's a piece of federal legislation that controls all of this, the Cannabis Act, and yet I would point out an example like the city of Oakville still doesn't have a single dispensary.
Hmm.
And as I just said, it's actually a crime to keep, to prevent people from accessing medical cannabis. Now, they would argue, well, people in Oakville can still access medical cannabis through the mail order system. That's not the same thing as going to your corner store and buying Tylenol. You know, if they're selling cannabis recreational in a corner store, why can't they sell it on the corner store for medical purposes? And additionally, it's very frustrating when you go to a quote unquote medical LP that usually works with a doctor's clinic. And the products are, in some cases, $10 more than they are at the dispensary down the road.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so,
So, Gavin, after a decade of this, okay, what is the mistake you watch applicants make over and over? I guess not everything is clear. Is it usually the paperwork, the physical security requirements, the money, or something about how they think about the regulatory?
not understanding the scope of what they're getting themselves into, and that it's not a license to print money, that it is way more than putting a seed in the soil and adding water and nutrients and it's not a money tree. Um, Growing is half the process. When it's growing, um, literally after that, you've got the curing process, which is another whole, takes, depending on how it's done, can take up to 2 months in itself. Um, and then, the whole processing process in of itself is regulated further by GMP standards, which is a whole other ball of wax, which is, if you want to get your products into Germany, let's say, your processing part of your facility needs to be built out to EU GMP standards, which are the same standards that they would produce vaccines in.
Yes, I was
So,
about to ask. Canada legalized early, and
right.
the Cannabis Act became a template other countries looked at. But 10 years on, what did Canada get right, and what would you change today?
What did we get right? Um, that's a good question. I don't think there was a lot that they did get right. I mean, it was treated very much as a land rush, sort of uh, um, here's a great opportunity for anybody that wants to have at it, sort of thing, instead of um, qualifying people in any kind of way that may have had expertise or previous interest in it or knowledge somehow. It was just treated as one big giant money making opportunity. So to start with, you had a lot of pump and dump schemes, just like in the .com era, where people used the concept of medical cannabis and eventually the recreational market to get a listing on a market and inflate the value of that share based on all kinds of hype. And they would quickly get rid of the shares and leaving other people holding the bag when a few years ago, there was, I'm trying to remember what the actual number was, but it was over 1 billion grams available on the market
Mm,
wholesale. That was, for sale, which is just a scenario, economic scenario that was driving prices into the ground. Absolutely. And putting people out of business, flat out putting people out of business. And that's what's happened is in terms of the way they've set it up. They've had a lot of people that have invested money that thought it was a viable business opportunity who really didn't do their homework and realized how, unless you're focused on, in my opinion, unless you're focused on medical and have a good revenue stream, good solid revenue stream, because it's different. Medical is an inelastic, recreational is an elastic. If people come back again and again and again for your product because it works, it's a totally different proposition. So if you built a cannabis company based around medicine first and then treated the recreational as gravy second, then there would be more successful cannabis companies. But that's not what happened. They used the medical excuse as a reason to get the license and then focused on recreational as soon as recreational became legal. And there's a lot of them that are now out of business or
okay. Where
got
is
bought out.
where's cannabis today as a therapeutic actually heading? Is it converting with pharmaceuticals or staying its own category?
No, I think it's very much in the pharmaceutical realm. I mean, I've been to high level pharmaceutical conferences where I've seen very senior people at drug companies, very large drug companies,
Yeah.
discussing them designing cannabinoid-based drugs. And there's what's of big interest to me is the sort of three camps you have at work there. You have one camp that wants to cook up all the cannabinoids in a test tube. Um, Another camp that I'm mostly in that believes, we've got too much carbon in our atmosphere to start with, so why don't we just grow all the cannabinoids we need? It's simple enough to grow hemp. Hemp has most of the cannabinoids you need without growing high THC cannabis anyway. And it's simple enough to grow to high THC cannabis. Um, so yeah, it's very much in the realm of replacing a lot of over-the-counter medications and very serious medications. The largest selling drug in the world a few years ago was a drug I take called Humira, selling $6 billion a year about 4 or 5 years ago. But if you look on the box, it directly says on it works through interacting with the CB2 receptor, which is exactly how CBD works. It's precisely how CBD works. So, like I said, I've been at conferences and seen people write out on a whiteboard in a matter of months their drug development pipeline for developing a cannabinoid drug for, whether it was autism or schizophrenia or Crohn's or osteoarthritis or a lot of autoimmune diseases.
What would you tell someone about to enter this industry, whether they are applying for a license or building a product? Is there any message that you tell them?
Um, I mean,
I mean,
do
for
your
me,
homework.
I could tell you, don't underestimate how to market the products. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, most important rule in business, and it's not any different in this industry, is know your market. Know your market. And just as I was speaking about the inelastic demand in the medical market, um, that's in my opinion, that would be the best way to get going, is to develop. Um, that's the biggest problem in any business is customer
Yeah.
turnover. So reducing that, keeping a steady flow of revenue that's always getting, like a river. It's flowing deeper, wider, faster. And then eventually, if recreational is in the plan, then adding recreational to it and treating that as the gravy on top, the cream on the top.
Gavin, I would like to thank you for being real with us. You've been on every side of this as a patient, as the person building companies through the rules, and as someone teaching the next group coming in. Audience, if you want to understand cannabis regulation in Canada for someone who lived it rather than studied it from outside, go back and listen to this properly. Gavin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.